How long should your episode opening be? Thank you for joining me for the Audacity to podcast. I'm Daniel J. Lewis. Did you take note of how long that took? What is the first thing your audience hears when they play your episode? Are you providing value from your very opening, or are you just keeping your audience from what they came to hear? Although the terms intro or introduction and opening are often used interchangeably, I'm going to be more specific to call the opening everything your audience hears before your episode's unique content. I would consider the intro to be a smaller piece of that. For example, an intro could be for the podcast as a whole, or the introduction for your guest, or how you lead into the topic like I'm doing right now. It's my introduction to the topic. So, how long should your episode opening be? The answer is as short as possible. Thanks for listening. I'm Daniel J. Lewis. Now, of course, I'm going to dig into more detail because you probably have some questions, and I want to try and answer those with some anticipation and go into more detail about why it should be as short as possible and how to make it that way a little bit. So, yes, I am actually leading with the answer here, just like how you should lead with great content in your podcast episode after episode. People come to your podcast to hear the content, not your introduction of the content. And they especially don't come to hear your introduction of the whole show and explain again the premise of your whole podcast. It may seem impressively professional to have a high production opening with custom music, dramatic sound effects, and a professional voiceover explaining who you are, who the podcast is for, and what the podcast promises. That was tiring just listing all of those things that people often include. But I challenge you to consider that your audience will be impressed not by the production quality of your opening, especially if it's in a stark contrast to the production quality of your content, but really they will be impressed by the quality of your content and I think how quickly and how well you fulfill your promises for that content. Take internet searches, for example. Have you ever searched for a recipe? Try searching DuckDuckGo for cinnamon toast recipe. I did that as a little example, and I picked the current top result, and I knew what kind of result I'd get. The title of that page, at least at the time of this recording, was The Best Cinnamon Toast Ever. This should be one of the simplest recipes on the internet. Cinnamon and sugar. You just need to know the amounts. Instead, that top result, The Best Cinnamon Toast Ever, contained 14 paragraphs and 2 subheadings and several pictures before getting to the actual recipe. And in case you're wondering, the recipe they gave is a 1/4 cup of sugar and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and they actually recommended a pinch of salt, though I personally prefer about 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon in my cinnamon sugar recipe. But do you see, I just gave you the recipe right there in a very short sentence. I know there can be some other explanations about the technique and stuff, and make sure you use this kind of bread or this kind of butter or toast your bread for the best results or anything like that. Sure. Okay. Yeah, some people don't know that stuff, and maybe the recipe needs to include that. But don't let your podcast episodes be like those recipe web pages, unless your audience is actually coming for the story and explanation because you've promised that to them from your podcast description. See, people are coming hoping that you will fulfill the promise you've made through your podcast description. And if you don't fulfill that promise quickly enough, people will often leave. So specifically, how short should your opening be? I recommend keeping it shorter than 10 seconds before you get into at least the unique content intro. But maybe your content doesn't need much of an intro. Certainly not 14 paragraphs and 2 subheadings just to get to a 2-ingredient recipe. Now you may be thinking, well, what about audio branding? How am I going to fit audio branding into only 10 or fewer seconds? And I am definitely a fan of audio branding, and the best audio branding can be done in seconds. Just think of some commercials for different products out there that have little tunes or little ditties that come with them, like Intel. And that's it. Or think about other brands, car brands or food brands, products, software, and such. that have unique audio branding, that their audio branding lasts for maybe less than a second. Your podcast could have that same kind of thing. The Audacity to Podcast's complete opening used to be longer than a minute, maybe even closer to 2 minutes, because I had this whole thing where I might do a teaser in the beginning and then I'd say, welcome to the Audacity to Podcast, episode number whatever, and then I'd give the episode title, then there'd be the intro music, which was way too long, and then I'd come in, introduce myself, introduce the premise of the podcast and who the podcast was for, remind you of the web address, all of this stuff, and my explanation of what was in it is only representing part of the time it took. But then I restructured it, and now the music is only about 6 seconds long. And when I made that change, it actually felt really good to have a short music clip that was still unique to my show. And it's actually from the same music I've used for 15 years now, but now much shorter, so you get to the content sooner. And you may be thinking, well, what about welcoming my new audience? How will they know what my podcast is about, or whether my podcast is for them, or any of this kind of stuff that you may be thinking? And some people even advise saying, don't forget your new audience. And certainly don't forget your new audience, but also recognize that podcast consumption is different from broadcast TV and radio. And it's even different from YouTube consumption. YouTube is not a podcast platform, and consumption on YouTube is very different from consumption in podcasts. On traditional broadcast media like television and radio, you might tune in right in the middle of the content, or you don't know what you're actually tuned into at all. You just turned on the radio or turned on the TV. What channel are you even on? What time is it? What is this thing right now? Am I on a commercial break? Is this the actual show? What is this show? What is this about? See, you don't have that context there. And people frequently come and go with little to no context about the content that they're consuming or about to consume in traditional broadcast media. And on YouTube, people will bounce from video to video, often falling down what I call a recommendation rabbit hole that includes other channels they've never seen before, but that offer attractively relevant content that you just have to watch. Just one more video. But podcasting is different. And I think that difference is a big thing that makes podcasting great. People don't usually stumble upon or accidentally start playing a new podcast. They usually listen or watch from intentional action, aside from what we can call secondhand podcast. Additionally, they usually have a lot of immediately available context about the podcast and episode-specific content. Number one, they probably saw your podcast title, artwork, and description before they followed the podcast in the first place. Number two, they can usually see your episode title and artwork while playing the episode. And number three, they probably found or were recommended your podcast for a specific reason. Thus, I don't think it's necessary for you to explain the premise of your show or introduce yourself beyond your name, if even that's required, which I think that is a good thing to still include. But I don't think you need to do much more than that in every episode. If you really want your new audience to hear you introduce the podcast and yourself, the kind of stuff that your podcast description should have, but if you want your audience to hear you expound on it, then make a short trailer episode specifically for that and mark it as a trailer type. And that can be the trailer for your show that then gets featured inside of podcast apps. And many podcast apps will promote that as listen to this trailer to learn more about the podcast. So it's a great reason to have a trailer. And you only get that when you mark that episode as a trailer type of episode. I went into more detail about trailer types and also bonus types and full episode types in episode 353 that I have linked in the notes, a simple tap or swipe away, or at the audacity2podcast.com/short opening. So it really comes down to this. You need to consider your most important audience. That is the one you already have. As you can see, I've mentioned, there are other ways to ensure your new audience knows what your podcast offers. But your most important audience is the people already consuming your podcast. So optimize the experience for them. And I believe you'll actually make a more comfortable experience for the new people coming to your podcast. Imagine this, and please tell me I'm not the only one who feels this way. You're in some kind of a session, whether in person or in an online meeting. You're eager to hear something from the presenter. You're there on time, and the presenter has started also on time. But then some people join late. So the presenter breaks their flow, welcomes the new people, and then rehashes what they just said for the sake of the new people. Frustrating, right? Not only did that break the flow for everyone already there, making them hear certain things over again that they already heard, it actually even wasted the time for the people who joined late, because now they'll miss what the presenter could have shared in the time it took to rehash for those late people. And nowadays, pretty much everything is recorded or someone is taking notes, so anyone who's late could just say, hey, what'd I miss? And can get the notes or look at the recording later to get it. Just don't assume even your existing audience knows everything from years ago in your podcast. That's a different kind of podcasting sin to assume that. So it is okay to rehash older content within a new context, but you don't have to rehash what your whole podcast is about and who it's for and who you are. You don't have to do that in every single episode. And keep this in mind. No one will hate you for not wasting their time. Let me be blunt. A lot of podcast openings and intros are wasting people's time. And this is exactly why several podcast apps offer a feature to automatically skip a portion of a podcast's opening. Try to make your podcast so that your audience doesn't want to use that option on your show. If you're an indie podcaster just starting out, I hope this encourages you that you don't have to spend a lot of time and money producing a fancy opening. Be unique and audibly branded, but it doesn't have to be a major production. And here's a bonus tip. Use a unique cold open. A cold open has become commonplace in all kinds of media. And I think that's because it works so well to hook people into the content from the very first second. Consider how most movies and TV shows jump straight into the scene and don't even display a title sequence and credits until later. Sometimes not even until the end of what you're watching. I'll make a separate episode about what makes a good cold open, but as part of your episode opening, I still suggest that you keep your cold open as short as possible because you're going to keep your opening as short as possible. If you've appreciated this short episode, then please give it a like, thumbs up, share it, whatever it is that your podcast app allows you to do. Especially, let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything that you would like me to dig into further with this. You can probably do something through your podcast app or go to the website at theaudacitytopodcast.com/short opening. Now, I want to catch up with some things in the Value for Value community corner because it's been a while since I've thanked some people, and also I've gotten some new feedback and support that I really want to shout out because I love doing this kind of thing, connecting with you, learning about you, and getting to feature you. So Mike Dell sent 1701 sats, or 1701, that's a Star Trek super comment, on my previous episode, 15 Regrets from 15 Years of Professional Podcasting, episode 394. And he said, I have a lot of those issues. Hiatus is my number one as well. I'm the king of inconsistency. Happy 15th. Also, in response to the same episode, Stevie Taylor from the Gig Life podcast said, I just listened to episode 384 and loved it. I've taken a lot away from this. I love your podcast and I'm happy to see it back in my feed these last few weeks. Keep up the great work. Thank you for inspiring. Thank you, Stevie. I am glad to be back in your feed too. And Brian Insminger from Top Tier Audio streams Satoshis with a Modern Podcasting 2.0 app. Thank you so much for that, Brian. And Randy Black sent a super comment on a past episode, digging far into the past, with 2222 sats. And I call that the March of the Rubber Duckies boost because you've got to see the video that I animated a long time ago when I was practically just a kid. I've got that link in the notes for this episode too. Randy said, another awesome episode, Daniel. Keep up the great work. Go podcasting. Boost, boost, boost. Am I going to become a soundbite now because of that? We'll find out. And Dreb Scott sent, 55,555 sats saying, thank you very much for your tips on video feeds and enclosures over on podcastindex.social. Well, thank you, Dreb. And thank you everyone else for the kind support. If you get value from the Audacity to Podcast, there are multiple ways that you can give back. You can give back a financial gift of any amount, whatever you think the Audacity to Podcast is worth to you. You could give some of that value back by going to theaudacitytopodcast.com/give back. You could also send Satoshis through Modern Podcasting 2.0 podcast app. If you need one, I've got a link in the notes for how to find one. And the easiest thing you can do that doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time in a relationship. It won't cost you a relationship. I mean, you need to have relationships for this to work. I'm not going to say, hey, destroy your relationships for me. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg and a relationship. No, but what you can do is get someone else listening to the Audacity to Podcast so that they can become better podcasters like you too. Now that I've given you some of the guts and taught you some of the tools, it's time for you to go start and grow your own podcast for passion and profit. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from theaudacitytopodcast.com. Thanks for listening. Maybe I should do episode closings next.